want to begin just asking this question. When you were writing this book, where did you turn for personal motivation and encouragement when writing on such an intense, urgent, and emotional topic such as this?
Thank you for asking that. I have to say that one of the things that motivates me above all is the awareness of and the connection to and the constant channeling of my ancestors whose names I do not know, whose faces I cannot conjure, whose experiences I cannot imagine, but who I know suffered and endured the horrors of the Middle Passage in order to get to this country against their will. And I think of them at all times. I think about what they had to have endured. I think about what they had to be, how did they persevere in that nightmare as they were being transported to a place that they did not know, leaving all the people that they had known, all of their family members, wrenched from their family members, wrenched from the land, the only land that they'd known, and then taken to a horror that is beyond imagining. And I know that they endured because I'm here, and all of us who are descended from those who had to have experienced what they did in order for us to be here, owe our very lives to what they suffered. And I think about that all the time. It inspires me to make that suffering meaningful, make that suffering not in vain, to show to anyone that these were people that, though I may not know them personally, I know that their dreams and wishes and heartbreaks run through me, and that is what allows me to do the work that I do. It is what propels me in everything that I do, because this is one of this is the price that people who are descended from enslavement have to bear every day. That is that we cannot trace it all the way back, and we can only try to channel what they endured in order to bring to life what they could not have imagined in our current era. So that is one of the things that keeps me going at all times with all of my work. Beyond that, I think about my own more immediate ancestors whom I did know, and I channel also their dreams and disappointments and wishes and hopes and the deferred opportunities that they might have had. All of those things channel through me and propel me to do the work that I do. My belief is that if these people could endure and suffer and work through and still imagine and dream and persevere the way that they did, then surely those of us alive today can do the honor of recognizing what they went through, do the honor of uh, of giving them voice, and of if they could live it, we certainly can read about it. If they could endure it, then we can certainly take the time to incorporate this into our country's history. And so that is what propels me in the work that I do.
I mean, it's so clear, Ms. Wilkerson, that you both channel and you bear witness. I mean, for those of us who've read your powerful writings, whether it's the life of Dr. Robert Joseph Pershing Foster in Warmth, or whether it's Mr. Harold Hale and his daughter Miss in Cass, I
Yeah.
mean, you so tenderly invite us into the life worlds of Black people living under the logics of Jim Crow and racial hierarchy.
Yeah.
What's another relationship between Warmth of Other Suns and Caste for you? How did you make these connections in these varying texts and telling these beautiful stories?
Thank you for that. I feel that that one became a segue to the other, although unintentionally, because I indicated I this was not a book that I was planning. As soon as I finished Warmth, I didn't say, "Oh, I cannot wait to begin doing this." In fact, I have to say that with Caste, the origins of our discontents, I kept thinking after Warmth of the Suns came out that someone might pick up on the idea of caste, and someone might uh, move the ball down the line, because anyone who read The Warmth of the Suns has been exposed to the idea of caste, because caste is the language that I used in that book, as did the anthropologists and social scientists who studied Jim Crow at the time that Jim Crow was at the depth of or the breadth of its iteration. And so I use the word caste throughout The Warmth of the Suns. I began to, whenever I would speak about The Warmth of the Suns, I would describe that world and describe the people who were the ones who felt they had no other option, or felt propelled, or felt even forced by circumstance to look beyond their county, look beyond their world, and to try to find a place that would be a refuge. In other words, to begin the exodus out of the South. I looked to be able to try to understand what they had gone through, and in describing the world that they were living in, I started to use the word caste as well. And I began to recognize that if a group is assigned to a particular caste because a caste system has been created, and until it is dismantled, until it is disrupted, until it is actually overcome, then it still has this after effect. I mean, we see the afterlife in what we are seeing about how there's a one group in our society in this very moment for whom it seems that there is almost nothing that is that cannot be done to them. It's almost as if this is the one group, if someone's going to be face down on the pavement and the life drained from them. It seems as if there's one group throughout the 400 years, now 400 and 2 years of this. There's one group that has been consistently at the mercy of and targeted by this, what I call a caste system. And so then it's been so enduring that I began to use the language of subordinated caste to even refer to myself, meaning that was if this is the way the group is being treated, if this is the group that is being treated at the very bottom, that almost anything can be done to them and it's considered to be legal. Remembering that the tortures and horrors that people who were enslaved suffered, all of those things were legal. These things were not illegal. The things that were done to enslaved people were not against the law, because those who had created the law specifically determined that there was nothing that could be done that was against the law to occur to people who were assigned at the very bottom of the caste system. So I began to use caste as my own language when I would talk about The Warmth of the Suns, and I began to describe myself as part of the lowest caste in our country, the subordinated caste in our country, because that is in fact the way that that Black people are treated in the country. So it was an acknowledgement of that. It does not mean that you believe the group to be inferior. I absolutely positively do not, because this is a social construct. It's not real. It's a fabulation. It's a creation. It's not real, but it's been made to have consequences. And so it's an acknowledgement of the consequences of the assignment to the bottom of the hierarchy that the use of the term caste forces people to think about. And it forces us to think about the structure. It's not personal. It's about it's the power dynamic and the structure of the society. And if you don't recognize what the structure is, then you have no hope of dismantling it. So I began to use the word caste whenever I speak about The Warmth of the Suns. I thought that someone else might pick up the ball and move it further down the line, but they did not. So then I ended up writing the second book. So that's how it happened.
Though you use the language of caste and Warmth of Other Suns, and you were growing more and more familiar with the term and researching for and writing this book, what was something that surprised you, though? something that you ended up including that you had not originally anticipated or that you learned about this cast?
Well, I can tell you that what really stunned me was after Charlottesville happened, and we could see that those protesters, the people who were fighting the possible removal of the statue of Robert E. Lee, that they began to make a connection between the Confederacy and Nazi Germany. And they had the symbology of both regimes. They were proud to be connecting them. And that prompted something in me about memory and history, and how the distorted history affects the memory of what actually has even happened in the country. And I wanted to that set me on a course of looking at Germany, which I otherwise very likely would not have done. And in the course of looking at Germany, I wasn't so much focused on in the beginning about, I didn't know that there was this connection between Nazi Germany and Jim Crow. I personally did not know that. I mean, this is the kind of thing that we as Americans don't learn. I was looking to see how had it been that Germany had remembered and was presenting, had incorporated that history into the culture, education system, into the laws, into the politics of that country. How had they incorporated that horrible history into current day Germany? And that's why I went to look. But then when I started to look more deeply at the history, I then discovered that it turned out that the Nazis had been looking to the United States as they were building essentially what was a 12-year reign, a caste system in its own way. They had looked to the United States. And it turned out that the Nazis had, it turns out that, well, first of all, the eugenists, German eugenicists were in dialogue with American eugenicists in the years leading up to the Third Reich. I had no idea that there was this back and forth dialogue, and the Germans were actually learning from and admiring of the American eugenicists. I had no idea about that. They actually had admired the immigration legislation that the United States have been putting forth to restrict and to try to keep the immigrants, arriving immigrants, as Northern Europeans, giving preference to them. I had no idea that the American eugenicists were writing these books that were huge bestsellers in Germany. In fact, they were so popular with the Nazis that the Nazis were incorporating books written by American eugenicists in their own Nazi curriculum for German children. I mean, I had no idea of that. And then, of course, the most startling thing of all, the most gut-wrenching thing of all, is that the Nazis actually sent people to study the United States, to study the Jim Crow laws as they were creating what would ultimately become the Nuremberg laws. The Nazis sent researchers to study how the United States had figured out the laws and other ways of subjugating African Americans, Indigenous people and African Americans, as they were contemplating and planning the Nuremberg laws. That was just unbelievable. It's still wrenching to realize that that was a connection that was so visceral and so real, and it's gut wrenching to realize.
For all of the pain that comes through in these historical narratives, there's also such this strong thread and strand of hope in the text. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about your concept of radical empathy and what it could look like at this time in our time of division in our country?
Well, I want to preface it by saying that radical empathy I do not present that as the answer for a 400-year-old social order. The answers have to be structural. The answers need to be political, economic, and social. They need to be legal. They're on every sphere, every division, every sector of our society, warrants and demands inspection. And as we right now in this current moment with the headlines, we realize that policing is one of those sectors, and criminal justice are sectors that demand at this time a deep inspection, overhaul. I don't present myself as a person who is an expert on this at all. I'm merely saying that it's self-evident. And so I want to emphasize this requires structural repair and overhaul of every system in our country if we are to survive as a society, because this is untenable. It cannot continue at the current rate. And we also know that there are many other countries that, while we're not saying that other countries are perfect, but they do not have the same level of gun violence. They do not have the same level of people dying at the hands of police officers. They do not have the authorities. There are many, many things that do not have the same level of COVID deaths. I mean, there's so many things that we can see are challenges in our country. And the country needs to be, because the country has led on so many other levels, it should be up to the United States to begin leading in this effort to overcome these divisions. I mean, this is a moment of existential crisis, but a crisis also means opportunity. So there's the opportunity to be able to make massive, massive change and going beneath the surface to get to the bottom of it, to get underneath it, to really truly recognize what has and hasn't worked, because we're in a moment of karmic decision making here. But in the meantime, I mentioned radical empathy as something that can have more power than I think people give it credit for. And that is that had some of the people in these circumstances had some basic human empathy for a fellow human being, seeing the humanity of another person right in front of them, it could be said that some of the people could allow themselves to step out of themselves and to be able to imagine not what they might be doing in a particular situation that they've never been in and might never be in, but how is it that another person is experiencing their life, so that they can begin to imagine not what an individual empathy is, not just imagining what you would do in a situation that you've never been in and never will be in, but to try to do the hard work, be willing to do the hard work, to begin to understand another person's experience. And that takes work, it takes study, it takes understanding the larger forces in society. It takes listening to someone else, so that you are, again, not imagining yourself in a situation you've never been in and never will be, but what is it like to be this other person? That helps us to better understand why people make the decisions that they do. I mean, my response to almost the question that some people ask, why do those people do this? And why are those people doing that? And there's only one answer to that question, only one answer. The answer is, what do human beings do when they are in that situation? That's the only answer to that question. To access that answer means allowing yourself to learn and to know what must it be like to be in that situation, and then to know that were you in that situation, it is possible that you might have a similar reaction from someone else, but you have to know that person's experience. This is most important. The idea of radical empathy is most important for people who have not had to, who've had the latitude of not, the luxury of not having to be the target of a caste system, the luxury of not having to think about many of these issues that are truly life and death issues for people who are marginalized and targets of the caste system. Radical empathy in general, is kind of required for people who are marginalized, because if you're a marginalized person, in order to survive in that society, you have to begin to imagine what is it that the person who's in a dominant position might be thinking or wanting. You have to by definition, in order to survive in a caste system, if you're at the bottom of the caste system, you very likely are forced to think about the perspective of people who are in power. But if you are the person in the place of dominance, you have the luxury of not even ever having to think about it. So radical empathy is directed primarily toward those who have not had to harness empathy in order to survive or succeed in the society, because the society is built around their needs, centering them from the beginning. And so this is something that would allow people who are in power, allow people who are born to dominance without any action on their part, to begin to connect with people who they would otherwise not have to think about, but to recognize that we are all interconnected, whether we wish to recognize it or not. when it comes to the pandemic, when it comes to COVID-19, it has been a reminder that we are interconnected whether we wish to be or not. COVID-19 and the virus does not care about the color of someone's skin. It does not care about what the passport says. It will infect any human being that it has access to and who is susceptible to the virus. And so this is one of the things that we might have learned from all of this, is that we are all interconnected. I mean, it spreads throughout the world because of the interconnectedness, and it doesn't recognize national boundaries that human beings might have created. So this is a reminder that we are all interconnected, and radical empathy is one way of accessing, one way of extending that natural, the connection we already have into our very being, so that in some ways there are moments where it could literally mean a matter of life and death. And I want to say, when it comes to these cases of people who are dying who are first harmed and then die at the hands of police, I think it's important to recognize that, where is the empathy for the people when they have been subdued and are in the final breaths? Where is the empathy? Giving benefit of the doubt, where's the empathy to exert some type of CPR or human connection to an individual at that time? This is a total and complete breakdown of human connection in our society, and it's costing lives. In addition, of course, I want to emphasize that this is structural and needs to be dealt with on a structural level. But on a day-to-day basis, what an individual can do, this is a complete and total breakdown of human connection. And we as a species cannot survive in that way.
Ms. Wilkerson, when I read you and when I listen to you, I hear social science, public policy, theology. What were some of the most influential authors or experiences that shaped your growing expertise while writing Cast?
Well, again, as I said, I'm inspired by the ever-present channeling of those who've gone before me. I would say that I have been profoundly influenced by the hundreds and hundreds of people that I interviewed. I should say, had basically auditioned for a role of being a protagonist in The Warmth of the Suns. I carry within me the wisdom, the received wisdom, and perspective and perseverance of all of those people that I had the honor and privilege of getting to know. They are still with me always, all of them, Ida Mae, Robert, and George, and the hundreds and hundreds of other people that I interviewed or had the privilege of meeting while working on that. In addition, of course, my own parents, and all of the people that I had the honor of knowing. I'm one of these people who truly believes from the ground up, and I believe in the wisdom of regular everyday people, the wisdom of people who happen to find ways to survive out of no way. And I think that they have a lot to teach us. And I want to always center what I do with the wisdom of the people, because they, without all of the benefit and all of the entitlements and privileges that others might have, found a way to survive long enough to raise succeeding generations and to be able to make the world, make it possible for those of us who are alive today to be able to do what we're doing. So I owe a great debt to them at all times, and I always want to center that. In addition to that, of course, I've been very moved by and inspired in terms of the book, Caste: Origins of a Discontent, by those who had the courage to go into the Jim Crow South, particularly Allison and Elizabeth Davis, a Black couple who were anthropologists. They were trained in the Northeast at Harvard, and he was trained at Harvard. Allison Davis, and they risked their lives to study and to record what the Jim Crow South was actually like. They were there with a white couple, and because Jim Crow was so tightly policed and enforced and so rigorously maintained, that they had to act the part of the subordinated caste. They had to sublimate their own intelligence and their education. They had to sublimate their true selves in order to survive. And they had to keep up the pretenses for the entire time that they were there, which was a matter of years. They could not be seen with the white couple that they were friends with, who were scholars as well. They could not be seen as equals. They could not meet openly. They had to be very, very careful how they managed, even though Allison Davis was the senior person. He was the one in charge of the study, but he had to act as a subordinate to a scholar, the white scholar that he actually was senior to, and so they had to live in that way, and it was dangerous. They had to be watch their every step, and so I am tremendously inspired by the work that he did and of others. Burley and Mary Gardner was the white couple in that case, and together it took both couples to do work on both sides of that caste system in order to accurately portray what was going on. And of course, what was going on in the Jim Crow South was the foundation of caste in our country. It was in the South that enslavement took hold and established the protocols and the power dynamic that we live with to this day, that's passed on through the generations. And so they were the ones studying that, and they risked their lives to do that. And so there are many, many people. There are many pages of endnotes in Caste Origins of Our Discontents, and there's a long bibliography. But as I think about it, I think they stay with me more than anyone, because I feel as if I walk in their footsteps. I feel that I sought to carry the baton of the work that they did. And I believe that it's the responsibility of anyone who gets a chance to do this kind of work to give recognition to those who came before them.
Thank you so much. So you've blessed us and taught us with the warmth of other suns and now caste. What's next for you, Ms. Wilkerson?
Well, I want to say that this book, like with The Warmth of the Suns, has taken over my life, and I had no idea. The Warmth of the Suns kept me on the road until COVID hit. I mean, that book had been out for 10 years, and it kept me on the road nearly nonstop. While I was still working on Caste, I was also on the road with Warmth of the Suns. This book has not been out. This book's been out for about 8 months, and it's kept me on the road virtually. And to such a degree that it's taken on a life of its own. I don't even know how to describe it, because the world that we're in is so surreal anyway. But there are so many people who have been taking up this book in their own ways. It has become something that is, that belongs to the people who have embraced it. And, there have been so many events that are going on virtually that I have nothing to do with, that, there's so many of them that we will be looking at something that we'll see something online, and I'll have to say to someone, am I giving a talk at Bryn Mawr on Tuesday? And they'll say, people say, no, that's someone else. We don't have anything to do with that. I mean, so this is what's happening. It's taken on a life of its own. And when something takes on a life of its own, it takes over your life too. So that's, for right now, this is what I'm doing.
Listen, on behalf of the entire Wake Forest University community, I just want to say a heartfelt thank you to you, Isabel Wilkerson, for participating in this conversation tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.